Do drip emitters need to line up perfectly with the plant? What happens if your drip spacing doesn't match your plant spacing? And how close should they be to the plant? Over the years, I've answered those questions for hundreds, maybe even thousands of gardeners. And today, I'm going to cover everything you need to know so you can get the best drip emitter placement for your garden. And at the end, I'm going to share some of the most common mistakes I see people make with emitter placement. To answer one of those questions directly, no, emitters don't have to be right on top of the plant. In fact, you really don't want your emitter too close to the plant because you could end up getting the stalk wet, which is one of the things you hope to avoid when using drip irrigation. The reason it doesn't have to be right on top of the plant is because how water moves through the soil. You may have heard of wicking, lateral movement, or capillary action, and those are all different ways to describe how water moves through soil. In common loamy garden soil, water is going to move about 12 inches from the point of drip. And that means the drip emitters don't have to be right on top of the plant because water is going to travel beneath the surface. Now, there is an exception to that. If one of your beds gets too dry, or like us, you forget to water in the plants right after you transplant them, your soil might become what's called hydrophobic or scared of water. In reality, what this means is the soil texture has become such that there are portions that repel water. You probably have seen this when water beads up on the surface and runs down instead of being absorbed. Well, that's an example of hydrophobic soil. In hydrophobic soil, water is still going to spread from the point of drip through the same mechanisms we discussed before, such as capillary action and wicking action, but it's not necessarily going to go where you want it. If it's hydrophobic where the roots of the plants are, well, that zone might be repelling your water instead of going to the roots. So what can you do if you have hydrophobic soil? Well, one of the remedies is actually drip irrigation, or rather, the remedy is slow application of the water, which drip irrigation provides. You may have been in your garden before hand watering when you didn't properly water in your transplants first, and you spend a lot of time hand watering, you go dig in the soil and you find bone dry soil. And then if you keep digging around, well, the water might be moist way over here. And that's because the water followed the channels that the hydrophobic soil forced it into. And if you see dry areas right below where your emitter is dripping because the water has run off, well, adding a second dripper can often help because it can find other channels to get to the roots of the plant. Or you can address the soil by top dressing with some organic mulch or some compost. And though you'll need to be careful if the plants are already in, you can use a fork to help aerate the soil and create new channels and get rid of that hydrophobic soil. And if you really need, you could use one of the common wetting agents out there to help bind water and move it where you want it to go. We set up a dripper to provide a good example of soil that has become hydrophobic. Now, you might think we're going to have good soil moisture here below this dripper because we can see that the surface is moist and we know we've ran it long enough to create a lake. So let's take a look beneath and see what we have. As soon as you go more than just a couple inches, we're back to bone dry dust and just a wet surface. So all that water that you might think is getting to your plant is actually just running down and forming this lake. And even the water pooling up there and starting to get heavy on top of the soil still isn't absorbing. And as you can see, now that I've created a depression here, the water still isn't absorbing, it's just creating another lake. And while you think this might be okay, really it's just going to evaporate. And that's why one of the remedies for hydrophobic soil is to cover in mulch or compost. And so that's it traps it and gives it the time it needs to absorb. Soil type plays a pretty big role in emitter placement. For example, over time, water is going to wick further in a clay soil than in a well-draining sandy soil. But even in a fast-draining soil, there's still going to be some lateral movement of water. Take this for example. Imagine the tennis balls, the ping pong balls, and the lintels are different types of soil or different particle sizes that are found in soil, such as sand, silt, and clay. Take the tennis balls. You'll notice that they're the largest ones in the container. Well, those would be similar to the sand particles found in soil. Relatively speaking, they're much larger than the silt and the clay. And as you can see, if you were to pour water in here, well, it's going to go straight through. It's going to have no problem penetrating the soil. Then we get to our silt layer, which is the ping pong balls. Here, water is going to slow down a little bit and most likely experience more lateral movement. And then finally, we get down to our clay particles, the smallest particles found in soil, and that's not nearly as permeable as silt and sand. If we were to pour water in here, it's going to slow down significantly at the clay, and it's going to spread out even further so long as we didn't let our clay get hydrophobic. Nearly all soils are actually a mix of the 3 different particles, and that is going to impact how water travels. And that's why in drip irrigation, we tend to use the standard water is going to spread about 12 inches from the point of drip unless you've allowed it to get hydrophobic. Now, one exception to this that has become pretty popular in the last few years is using soilless mixes. Soilless mixes are trying to mimic sandy loam because that's the near ideal soil type for growing vegetables and fruit. So you can use that sandy loam to guide your emitter placement to some degree. You'll want it right on top of the plant, and if you're using a single dripper, probably not the full 12 inches away either. Now, one thing to keep in mind is those soilless mixes are easier to become hydrophobic, so you really want to keep them at the right level of moist. Not wet, but don't let it get bone dry either. And that's important whether you're using drip irrigation or hand watering. Let's go take a look at emitter spacing and plant spacing. If you're new to drip irrigation and drip emitter placement, drip line is what we use in the average sized raised bed, and it has an emitter every 6 to 12 inches, and we space the lines or rows about 12 inches apart. When using drip line or drip tape, some of the emitter placement is already decided for you because the emitters are evenly spaced out in the drip line or drip tape. The most common spacing is 6, 12, 18, and 24 inches. And so what does that mean for your garden? Well, the first thing it means is don't overthink it too much. 6 and 12-inch spacing are the most commonly used in the garden, and that's what we use in our kits because they work in a wide variety of mixed gardens growing different types of fruits and vegetables. That makes it one that's very easy to overthink. I have seen people meticulously plan out their plant spacing and their emitter line spacing and line it up perfectly just for the first thermal expansion and contraction cycle to displace their emitter line, and it was no longer a perfect match. But the plants still did great, and that's because of how water travels through soil. No matter how well you place your emitter line, it's going to move, even if you have it in a shaded location so it's not getting too hot or cold. Every time the lines fill with water, there's turbulence, and that turbulence will move things a little bit. But as you can see, you can still get great results. In a mixed garden like this, you might have some plants at 12-inch intervals and you might have some at 24-inch intervals. And you'll say, well, I'm probably wasting water by having an emitter in between 2 of my 24-inch spaced plants, but that's not always the case because roots not only have depth, take for example lettuce and its shallow roots, or a tomato and its deeper roots, or a pepper that kind of comes in between. Well, those are watered not based so much on emitter placement, but how long you run the watering system for. Watering duration plays the biggest role in watering those different depths, but they also have width. Due to that width, those emitters in the middle aren't wasted. For example, with the lettuce and its shallower, smaller root system, it's better to have the emitter closer to the plant than it is with the tomato and its wider root system. With a tomato, in fact, you might end up with multiple emitters around it like we do with this one over here. If you're growing basil in your bed with tomatoes, or maybe you're growing the entire salad in one bed, a tight spacing can help ensure that all the roots get enough water at almost any watering cycle. If you need to keep a shorter watering cycle, well, that 6-inch spacing provides that little bit of extra water to make sure everything gets enough with that short watering cycle. Where if you're growing just a couple tomato plants in a bed, well, you could use 12, 18, or even 24 inches to great results, unless you have a really fast draining soil, in which case a little bit tighter down to 12 will get the job done. For folks new to drip irrigation, one of the biggest fears they have when they run out their drip line is when they don't see the emitters close to the plants. When you see that little wet spot on top, you might think your plants aren't getting enough water, even though the plants are showing you that they are indeed getting enough water. Let's take a look at a couple of these, and you'll see that the emitters aren't very close to the plant, and there's not even always one right on top of it. This here is a good example. As you can see, even though there's multiple emitters around the plant to make that little grid that people love in square foot gardening, none of them are even close to the stalk of the tomato plant. But the tomato plant is doing fantastic. And that's because water is traveling beneath the surface. And not only that, but plant roots are going to seek out the water. Not only will the roots seek out that moisture, but it's good to have them do so because that provides a nice stable root structure to help keep the plant healthy and strong. Now, even when you have multiple emitters around the plant like this, you still want to check your soil to make sure it's not hydrophobic. You could have an emitter right on top of it, and if the soil's hydrophobic, it could be running it out instead of getting to the roots of the plants. So it's important to continue to check the moisture, if for anything else, just to make sure your soil didn't get hydrophobic down there, because tomatoes like this or peppers really like that consistent access to moisture, and that helps prevent things like blossom end rot. And if you do have hydrophobic soil, well, you want to find that out first. And that's why I recommend checking your soil before you go through all the work of moving your emitters around, reconfiguring your drip system. And it's best to avoid that instinct to like pick up your drippers and move it right on top of the plant like this, because the wrong kind of fungus and bacteria love wet stalks. And you also increase the risk of root rot and similar problems like that when you just apply too much water in one very small local location on that. So to check your soil, you could use a soil moisture sensor, you could do the finger test, a screwdriver, or even one of the stabilizer stakes if you're already using them with your drip line. Outside of some extreme situations like an emitter really far away from the plant or hydrophobic soil, emitter spacing doesn't play as critical a role as watering frequency and watering duration. And you can learn all about those in the video on screen there at the top right or in the description below. These general placement rules work whether you're using button drippers or drip line. And that is one of the things I've seen confuse people, because they're used to seeing drippers placed into a stake and put right on top of the plant. And they think drip line is something you just run down the row next to the plants. And well, that is mostly accurate, but one thing to keep in mind is the drippers inside a drip line and a button dripper are essentially the exact same thing. In our kits, we include both button drippers and drip line, and they both put out half a gallon per hour. So they're doing the exact same function in almost the exact same way, just the button dripper gets that plant that's a little too far out of the way, and the drip line covers the rows. Here we have a good example of drippers essentially doing the same thing as drip line, with one on each side of the plant. And as promised, here's 5 mistakes to avoid with drip emitter placement. Some of the most common mistakes I see people make with emitter placement is placing the emitter too close to the plant or right on top of the stalk, where you end up rotting out the plant. Thinking the small wet spot that is on the surface is all there is to the water, and not realizing how far water really does spread beneath the surface outside of rare circumstances like extremely hydrophobic soil. And another mistake is not checking the soil to see if it's hydrophobic first. And really that mistake comes down to when you're transplanting, you do want to make sure you water your plants in nice and good. And meticulously making sure their emitter lines are perfectly matched to their plant spacing, just to see it all go out the window the first time it gets hot outside. Perhaps the biggest mistake I see people make in emitter placement is overthinking it, when really watering duration and frequency are the keys to making sure the plants get that nice, consistent moisture that they need to thrive.